Preface. Most political science programs do not prepare students for modern political campaigns. I should know. I was one of them. In 1988, I began as a political science student at the University of Maryland, where well-intentioned professors took us on a long and winding path through various competing theories of government and politics. Nothing taught me about how political campaigns work or how to win elections. Frustrated, I switched schools and majors, settling on mass communications. During my time at the University of Florida, I got involved on campus. I ran for office, served in student government, and met incredible people who would go on to be political leaders after graduation and leaders in a host of other endeavors, from education to business. We learned on the job, made mistakes, and got involved in political campaigns while we were students. As it turns out, that is exactly how the best in the business learned. On campus, then locally, a chance meeting, then a breakthrough. Mine came as a volunteer for a congressional candidate in Gainesville. Within a short period of time, he hired me as his communications director. That first candidate, Dave Gentry, won a three-way race for the nomination, but lost in the general election because he couldn't raise enough money to compete. But it was an amazing experience. Clumsy, goofy, raw, and exhilarating. Our opponent was Karen Thurman, a well-known, well-liked incumbent who did just enough to stay out of trouble and connected enough to the community to get reelected. Gentry was the publisher of a local magazine that took rather questionable ads on, and I'll clean this up a bit, anatomy enlargement. My first bit of paid consulting: cancel the ads and find every single copy you can and destroy them. Thankfully, neither our primary opponent's teams nor Thurman's found any. It's one thing to lose. It's quite another to be embarrassed. That would come another time, in a different race. And I'll wait to tell that story a bit later. No one taught me how to be a communications director, or, a bit later, how to run campaigns. Looking back at that first race, I winged it. I wish there were a more formal education in the practice of politics, and more books like the one that you're going to read, detailing how political campaigns are actually run, not studying and analyzing them in the aggregate. The program I graduated from at the University of Florida had elements of it in a great course by Bill Hamilton, the legendary Democratic pollster considered a founding father of modern professional campaigning. He told us what it was really like, gave us relevant readings and assignments, and put us in campaign simulations that were fantastic. Bill was my first mentor, not because he guided my early career, but because he taught all of us what a career would look like. Everyone should have that experience. During the last year of my doctorate, in 1996, I had the opportunity to work for the Republican Party of Florida while my dissertation was stuck in the black hole of editing, quarantined by my advisor, Dr. Stephen Craig, who could not understand why I wanted to graduate so quickly. We both hated my dissertation. I hated it because it was getting in the way of me working on actual campaigns, and he hated it because he thought it was an A idea, but a C execution. I think it was better than that. Not an A, but certainly a grade-inflated B+. But it didn't really matter to me anymore. I had already moved on. One of my candidates was a shoo-in incumbent. Another, a smart fraternity brother who vouched for me for the job. And another, Nancy Argenziano, who in my mind had a real shot at upsetting well-liked incumbent Helen Spivey for the Florida House of Representatives. Argenziano won, and Republicans then controlled the lower legislative chamber for the first time since Reconstruction, and they haven't lost it since. But she almost killed me. After I'd endlessly lobbied my boss, Frank Terrafirma, about her, the party ultimately paid for a series of campaign ads through the National Republican Senatorial Committee's largesse. Radio ads ran on all the major stations around Halloween, and I'll never forget them. To the tune of the theme song for the Addams Family, the jingle went, "Her name is Helen Spivey. She's racing all your taxes. Less money for your family. She's Helen Spivey." And then the inescapable earworm, da-da-da-dum, snap, snap, da-da-da-dum, snap, snap. I can still hear it as I write this second edition, almost 30 years later. I'm sure there were other verses, but it stuck, and it really pissed off Argenziano. She was hearing it from her core voters. Too negative. This was the pre-Donald Trump GOP, so the base was more genteel, especially on the west coast of Florida. So she let me have it. Pre-FaceTime, I could envision her in a badass biker jacket, swinging an electrified crowbar like Thor without the smile. After a quick trip to the bathroom, I called Frank, and he pulled the polling from the venerable Terrence group. She was closing in on Spivey. If I could just calm her down, we were going to win. These are the moments when you wonder if politics of academia are less dangerous. I called her back, first getting her frazzled campaign manager and then her, and I made the case. No, Nancy, we're not going to pull the ads. They're funny and they're working. They still are, and they still did. Nancy allowed the ads and me to live through Election Day. She won, and that was one of the most memorable nights of my career. We joked about that crucial call, and she invited me to work for her in Tallahassee, which I appreciated, but ultimately declined. Despite all that I had studied in class, there's nothing like working on a campaign to learn about how campaigns really work. This includes thinking clearly when your candidate definitely wants to kill you. From there, fellow Gator and my future wife, Lisa, and I moved to Washington, D.C., where I worked for the Gallup organization, mainly on government contracts, healthcare, and media research. I got to write a bit for the Gallup poll and worked on a military-focused project with George Gallup Jr., which was a treat. He couldn't have been kinder or more encouraging. After 9/11, I moved on to work with past Bob Dole and future Donald Trump pollster Tony Fabrizio, who taught me much more about campaigns than I learned in college. The primary thing that he taught me was to think as a strategist and not just report polling numbers to the candidate. While Trump wasn't my guy in 2016 or 2020 or now in 2024, I was and remain happy for Tony that he was able to win the big one. I opened my own firm in 2004 with his permission and, uniquely, his support. My wife and I also moved from Maryland to Virginia, and our son was born. During this time, I met with Rowman and Littlefield Publishers, and they bought the rights to my first book. I had a good idea about updating the literature on the permanent campaign, and with a contract and a vast underestimation of the undertaking, I was set to write. I had no idea how hard it would be. It was during that period that a very close friend and groomsman of mine, H. Christopher Tompkins III, died while running for a seat in the Florida legislature. He had asked me to run the campaign, but I declined, instead setting up his website pro bono. After a lot of reflection, I'm not sure if it was worse turning it down or being there. To a real extent, I felt guilty about not being with him and was devastated by his loss. I didn't sleep much for close to 2 years. It was obvious to everyone but me that the book was the thing that had to wait. I wasn't ready to write it, and it didn't get written. In the meantime, I dipped my toes back into academia, first at the DC program for Washington University in St. Louis, teaching research methods. Then I bookended full-time stops as the interim director of the Political Management Master's Program at George Washington University, with stints at Microsoft as their in-house pollster under the tutelage of Mark Penn, and at WPA Intelligence, an innovative polling, data science, and digital firm, as their chief strategy officer. I kept one foot in academia and taught from a professional perspective, like Bill Hamilton did. I designed and have taught a course in digital political campaigns for the graduate program in communication at Johns Hopkins University, after teaching a course called Modern Political Campaigns for students from the University of California system as they interned in Washington, D.C. I didn't know it at the time, but the seeds of the book were being planted by lectures, guest speakers, and readings I brought to my students. Over the years, every time I looked at the dedication to Chris that I had written on the first edition, writer's block locked me down. After a while, I thought I'd never get back to writing this. And then the COVID-19 pandemic locked us all down. In late March of 2020, I took another shot at it, but from a different perspective. So much had changed in the world of campaigns over the past 25 years. Especially in the last 20, with the maturing of the profession, the explosion of technology in daily life, and the speed of politics. This book pulls all this experience together and is something I couldn't possibly have written 2 decades ago. The first edition of this book was published 4 years ago. With the explosion of artificial intelligence in so many aspects of our lives, it felt crucial for this book to include a separate chapter just for this leap forward, and I hope you enjoy it. In addition to the extreme patience of my publisher, special thanks go to the campaign professionals from all points on the political spectrum who are named and who chose to keep their stories on background. Please note that this book is not an expose or a tale of settling scores. What you'll hear from them here are stories about what goes into modern political campaigns, why they've changed in the past 3 decades, and how to launch a career in political consulting. If you are thinking of such a career, I hope this helps you along your path. If you are simply interested in politics, I hope that hearing from professionals gives you greater insight into how we now choose our leaders and who does the extremely difficult work of winning. Extensions of this book are available at www.modernpoliticalcampaigns.com, as well as Facebook, Instagram, Substack, Blue Sky, Threads, and YouTube, with additional content and full interviews with many of the people interviewed for this book. Finally, while many people were involved in producing this book, I am responsible for all errors. Hopefully there are fewer in the second edition, but if you see something that needs corrected, please let me know. Thanks in advance. If you'd like to chat about campaigns, I'm always game. Michael D. Cohen, Ph.D., Johns Hopkins University, November 2024.